Back to do my numbers right.
Back with episode 9. I know yesterday we were talking about the topic of addiction. Allison, the lovely Larin Allison, was sharing her story and how addiction affected her life, and recounting that experience. And I'm super grateful you were vulnerable and you shared your story with everybody. I'm sure that a lot of people, some of it's going to be able to resonate, if not all of it. And we all know somebody that's affected with substance abuse issues or addiction, and whether it be ourselves or somebody that we're close with that's struggling with it. So I think you telling your story, I wanted to thank you for that, being like open and transparent about the struggles that you face with it. So thank you, and you can take it away from here.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for being that safe space for me to open up and share my story, because telling it, I'm sorry it was probably super long, but from my life experience and battling with addiction and alcoholism and all of that, it's very close to home for me. And the fact that I am at the point of where I am today, I do feel, I said this yesterday, that I feel like I have to do this. I have to, give back in any way that I can. I really do think that life is about overcoming your trials and tribulations, and then once that you've overcame them, you teach other people that are struggling with that how to, and that it just keeps going. So the fact that, I only have 2 years, like, to me, at the point of, in rehab, that seemed like forever, but now that I have 2 years, I'm just getting started in my journey. So I know that I'm probably gonna tell my story a lot, but I really hope that it does hopefully help people.
Absolutely. It's like the old adage, help yourself first and then turn around and help other people. So I think that's where, whether we realize it or not, struggles and trials that we've overcome, that is ultimately our medicine, or our gift that we could give back to others to help them and kind of help wherever they're at with their struggle that's relatable to yours. So that's great that you have that realization, and like you're actively working in alignment with that. Today, this is the follow-up to yesterday's episode, as everybody's well aware of, so thank you for tuning into that, and thank you for tuning in again today. We're going to cover a couple topics in regards to that after you shared your story yesterday, kind of, because we like to leave stuff with a positive note and actually how to potentially help yourself and help others that are in the space. So yesterday, you shared your story, so today we're going to follow up with that, with what those are. The first thing we're going to cover is actually getting sober, like how you got sober, advice that you could give others to get sober. Next, it's going to be about staying sober, because like getting sober is a large majority of the battle, but then actually staying sober, some of the trials, tribulations, mindset shifts that maybe you've had to overcome, or if you're still overcoming them, then like what we could share with others that are maybe in that space that like got sober, need help doing it. And then the last thing that we're going to cover is tips of supporting somebody getting sober, where maybe you aren't personally the one that is having the substance abuse issue, but you have a close family member, a family friend, a significant other, and they're struggling with addiction, and just being a supportive, caring, mindful person while helping them navigate that, and also just being mindful of your own actions and words and how you show up to support them. So those are the topics we're going to cover today. If you want to start talking about how you initially got sober and how you were able to kind of come to those realizations and progress from getting sober to staying sober.
Yes. Can you help me with the bullet points, because I do want to go off of kind of what we were just...
So we took some pre-show notes, that way we kind of were more concise with what we're talking about tonight, because we did have some important topics we wanted to cover, because this is, you sharing your story is beautiful and super important to connect with, but then also having the takeaways from that is almost equally as important.
Yeah.
So the getting sober aspect is that this is what you wrote is thinking positives. I will get my health back, feel better, have better relationships, not in the negative. My life is boring, I don't get to drink anymore.
Okay, yes. So this is actually, Tony Robbins taught me this, and he used the example from somebody that I think was trying to quit smoking, I believe, but it's basically kind of back to what one of our podcasts were about last week, about the manifestation and the secret and stuff. But make sure to think about all of the things that you are benefiting from quitting drinking. So or whatever substance that it is, like if your main goal is to get sober, just really visualize the life that you want without that substance or that thing, and think of all the benefits that you're going to get of that. So think of how good you're going to feel, like really, kind of back to the visualization. Visualize your life without it. Visualize your life with all the money that you're going to get back from, not spending it on that thing, or, just how good you're going to look, all of the positives, and don't look at it in the negatives and think that you're losing out on something. Don't be like, my life is going to suck because I don't have this thing, or I'm not going to be able to, go to events anymore. I'm going to lose all my friends. Like, don't think of it like that, because that's only going to put you right back to where you were, because you're thinking of, those things. So you're like, if you're looking at something, you don't want to lose something. Humans don't want to lose anything. So if you feel like you're losing out by leaving it, then you're going to go right back to it. But if you look at the life that you are going to create and the life that you do want to create, and just keep your vision forward on, the positive aspects of what could come out of it and what will come out of it. I am living proof of it. I know that, the way that my life looks now is totally different than the way that it used to look, and I have only right now a vision for it getting better, and all of the things that I have right now I'm super grateful for, and only at one point did I even visualize what I have right now. So just keep your eyes on the prize.
Definitely, I think that's important with anything, getting sober in particular, keeping your eyes on the prize, keeping in focus what it is that you do want, trying not to focus on the things that you don't want, and then building a life in accordance with that, so you're taking the steps to get exactly what you want, which we could go down a whole nother rabbit hole with those steps that you need to take, but that's going to still be on an individual basis, because everybody has different visions that they want for their lives, but you need to act in alignment with whatever your vision is, and then figure that out in the process of how to act in alignment with that.
Yeah, if you're really ready for change, visualize that person that you want to be, and just act as if that person would act.
Yep.
Literally just start acting like that person that you want to be, and it'll click.
Definitely great advice. I completely agree with that. One of the next things we have here is move, try to go make friends who are sober, or try to go do fun things sober. So
yeah, getting out of your environment.
Definitely. I think I touched on this yesterday, and we've talked extensively about this. I personally, from my opinion, is environment is probably the biggest factor into somebody getting sober and not getting sober, whether they want to admit it or not. That's probably, looking into it now, I know like the first act of getting sober is admitting that you have a problem and you need help. I think that should also be part of the admittal, is what you're admitting is, my environment isn't conducive to me wanting to get sober. Because when from my own experience looking in at other people's lives, it's not like they had all of this stuff going for them. It was super great. It wasn't stressful at all. And then they couldn't help themselves. Like, they had their dream job. They're earning crazy amount of money. They traveled all the time. They did all this stuff. And then they're like, oh, they just couldn't help themselves. Like, I highly doubt that's their experience, and they're having an alcohol addiction. I'm sure it's a lot uglier than that. So I do personally think, if you're experiencing some substance abuse issues, whether you want to admit it or not, this is me potentially, hopefully making you think into whether your environment is a catalyst in your choices to drink. But I think moving and getting new sights and scenery, as hard as it sounds, you could ask yourself the question, is it harder to be drunk in the same environment because I feel safe doing the same stupid shit over and over again? Or is it harder to go to a new place, meet new people, do new things, but I could probably do that a little bit easier because I don't have all these emotional triggers with all of these energetic ties to things that happen. I mean, both, you could get sober in both places. I'm just saying it in regards to what will make it easier on you. And from my own opinion, like I said, take it for what it is. I personally think you putting yourself out of your comfort zone into a new environment with new people's places and things, it'll make it easier on you to get sober. I mean, that's also dependent on having a network, because I don't think anybody could do it by themselves. I think they need support. So in the process of moving, though, you find those friends or those communities that you can interact with to help you achieve your sobriety.
And that is actually showing the universe that you are taking the steps to live the life that you want. So if you do decide that for yourself and you gain the courage to be able to, it will send you opportunities. If you're like, yes, I'm ready to do this, I'm going to step outside my comfort zone, I'm going to move, I am going to change my environment, I'm going to change my people, the universe is always there supporting you. It is whether we are accepting it or not. But if you make that choice, it will send you people in your life to help support you. It will send you new experiences. It will literally show you other ways of living if you are ready to make that decision for yourself and are able to do so.
You could choose, this is how I look at it. You could choose to be sober all that you want and be like, I choose to be sober, which you can will your way through it, but I think doing whatever you can to help yourself get you out of the same habit loops of driving by this package store every day on my way home from work.
Yeah, and all your memories and the places the things that I've done in certain areas that I've lived in, I've gone back there to visit, and I will think of those events.
Definitely.
You just do. We just do. Our memories and everything are tied to those places, and you're like, oh, remember when I did this, or remember when and it just really getting out of your environment. And that's why I'm so grateful for having the love of travel, because I do know that did play a huge part, and I will tell people that I'm grateful that, I wanted, to move out of where I was, and that's not always so easy for some people to do. But it really is super important, and I think a lot of the time people want to see because that's one thing that they tell you, the people, places, and things, to change those, and we always try to find a way around it. We're like, okay, but how can I get there without doing those things? And it just doesn't work. You do the work, and it works.
Definitely. Even if you don't even necessarily have to move out of state. I mean, I feel the farther you move away from where you have those energetic ties, the better. But you don't even necessarily have to move out of state. Even just moving a couple towns over in a place maybe you're not as familiar with, and then being open to meeting people that'll help support what your goals are. Which that was kind of in here. It's like, make friends who are sober or trying to do fun things sober, which I know that could be challenging. I know going to AA probably is a suggestion. I have my own thoughts on AA personally. I don't want to knock it at all because it definitely works, but I think I know there's other communities. One of my friends in Connecticut, he's like heavily associated in like Phoenix Recovery Group, and he's told me about it, and it seems super interesting for the fact of it's not necessarily, you're not saying, hi, my name is Jordan, I'm an alcoholic, and then then reciting whatever one of the steps you're on or like where you're at in the program. It's more of just like, hey, we're all admitting that we do have an issue, this is what the group is around, but it's not around that at all. We're going to go on a hike, we're going to go play dodgeball, we're going to play basketball, and I know drinking isn't going to be part of that. So I think finding that community, and you'd be surprised if it might take a little bit of effort on your part, but between Facebook and the internet, those groups can definitely be found. So it's just a matter of finding your community and making those friends and learning to enjoy things sober. I know that it's probably challenging for some people that if you're deep in addiction, you're probably doing everything either drinking or high. So that's a new thing to learn, but that's also where I feel like moving and changing your environment comes in, because if you're drinking, I mean, you could buy liquor anywhere in the United States fairly easily. You could Google a liquor store and find it, but especially for drugs, if you have a bad habit of doing some sort of like hard drug, finding those connections to do them, like I'm sure you could find them, especially if you've been in the addiction for a long period of time. You probably know where to look, but it's still a little bit harder. It's like, okay,
it takes more effort.
Yeah, I don't have that number I could just text and go, yo, bro, you around?
You want to put as many steps between you and that thing as possible, because after doing, you will, after making that phone call or trying to make that, it's like there's a lot of effort that's put in to go get it. Then it's a lot easier to just be like, okay, you finally catch yourself and you're like, I shouldn't be doing this. But if you make it super accessible for you and literally like one phone call away, like if you delete all the numbers, literally like delete the numbers, cut those ties, move, like go to a place where you don't know where the liquor store is at. So you don't automatically think like, oh, I could just go to this place, it's only 2.5 minutes away.
Yeah.
You don't know that. So make it as hard on you as possible to get that thing.
Yeah, and then also when you make the right decisions in that, definitely find some peace and like comfort in the fact of you're doing the right thing for yourself, and it's a better way to live ultimately. Mm-hmm. And then the last thing that we have on here is do stuff that you like to do that you lost interest in.
Yes. From experience, I know that can be difficult to do when you're still in it, quote unquote, because it really does make you lose interest in everything except for that thing. And for me, that was, drinking. And so I had to bring drinking along with anything that I used to like to do just to make it fun. But when you're trying to quit, you will, if you can force yourself and get yourself to go do those things that you know that you did once like, in the past before you got into all your shit that, yeah, I do like doing that thing. It's like maybe it was cooking or doing whatever, like you had a hobby or something and you literally just stopped doing it because all you're doing was your addiction. Start to go do that thing again. And it might not be like the most super crazy fun thing at first, but you will start to get your interest back in it. And it will start after you are not, on your substance and you start to become more and more into yourself, then you will remember the joy that you got from that thing and you will start to feel those good feelings from it. So really putting your place back into the things that you used to like doing.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like drinking or substances, like if frequent use or addiction, definitely kind of your focus just is exclusively on that.
Yeah, it makes everything like uninteresting. Dull. Yeah, it definitely does. You're like, yeah, you think about things that you used to literally love. And you're like, yeah, that doesn't sound that fun. Mm-hmm. You're like, no thanks.
Definitely.
It's awful.
So yeah, start trying to get back into the things that you were once into. And I'm for personal experience, not being addicted to anything, I know that could even be challenging for me to be like, well, I once enjoyed this, like let me see but it does come back. It takes a little bit of effort and persistence, and then you'll find the groove again. So it's just a matter of like choosing your heart. What do I want more? Do I want to be sober and be going to the gym regularly, or do I want to be fucked up and then regretting for the fact of like, damn, I can't stop this and like my health is deteriorating? So pick your heart. Definitely go back into stuff that you lost interest in. There is one more thing on here. I take that back, saying that was the last thing. Stay away from the substances as much as you can. If that involves you having to cut contact with people, setting your boundaries, ultimately, this is why I suggest moving, changing your environment, because like we were saying, it makes it that much harder to access whatever your vice is, and just knowing the situation that whatever you're putting yourself in, that it might make it that much more challenging for you to stay sober. If so, do that. Make it as hard as it is possible for where you're avoiding it. Definitely initially at first, until you kind of come to a more at peace with maybe other people if they're drinking. Like, I'm going to be in a place where other people are drinking. But that still takes time. So if you could avoid situations like that, that's definitely some solid advice.
Yeah, definitely. Just stay away from it if you can, if you really can. They do, and it sounds so dramatic. Like when I was in treatment, I remember they were telling my parents that they needed to take all of the alcohol out of the house. And I was thinking about it, and I was like, that is so dramatic. They don't have to do all that. But really looking back, they should have, because I relapsed and it was there and I knew that it was, and I ended up drinking their alcohol that was in the house.
Mm-hmm.
And not saying that I wouldn't have relapsed if that happened, but it definitely would have made it easier for me, because it's when you are that obsessed with an object, you know where it is. You know exactly where it is. And people do this with food too. If you have it in the house, junk food or something that you know that you don't want to eat, like throw it away. Get it away from you. Make it as hard as possible to get to. Make it that you have to go on this trip and do all these things, but don't keep it. Don't just go home and be like, well, you're torturing yourself. You're torturing yourself at that point. Just like keeping all the liquor in the cabinet and being like, don't touch that, don't touch that. Because the more you tell yourself you don't,
what are you saving it for? The one day that all of a sudden
exactly
you could manage it?
Yeah.
That's not going to happen.
Yeah, so definitely that.
Nice. So I agree with all that. Moving on, the next topic we wanted to touch on is staying sober. Because okay, you get sober. Now it's like the real work that takes place. You're sober for...
that's where the real work starts.
Honestly, it's one day at a time to be sober.
Yeah.
Especially when you're starting off. But going from there, you're a month sober, you're 2 months sober, you're 6 months sober, you're a year sober, you're 2 years sober. Kind of being able to stay sober. So one of the things that you have here is remember how bad it truly was.
Yep. So yesterday, even after we stopped the episode, I was apologizing for talking so long, because I know that my story is pretty lengthy and I try not to go into too much detail, but at the same time, I was telling Jordan that if somebody asked me what kept me sober, I would say that is what keeps me sober, is telling my story over and over again, and the gruesome parts of it that maybe at the time I thought were funny even, but really talking about them in the reality of the light that it really was that bad and worse. I mean, there was so many other things that I genuinely don't even remember, but those are the ones that stick out. But really holding on to how bad it can get, how quickly it can happen, because we can start to glamorize it and we can start to forget all of the instances where we freaked out and threw that table, or we cheated on our significant other, or we wrecked our car. Like, we can just, forget that and be like, oh, well, it was so fun. I was just partying and having fun with my friends. But really remind yourself of all the stuff that, you did, and all the feelings that you felt, and all the mornings that you woke up hungover, promising you were never going to drink again, or promising you were never going to, do that drug or whatever again. Like, remember how gnarly it was, because it doesn't sound anything that I want anymore when I look at it in that kind of a light. If I glamorize it, why wouldn't you want to do it again? If I talk about all the fun times that I had, and like all this like cool stuff that I thought that I was doing, like, obviously you're gonna want to do something that you deem is cool or fun. But if you put it in the light of like, I can't believe that I actually did that, like, you don't want to go back and do that again.
Yeah, definitely. I think actually being honest with yourself about the experience, and not looking at, like, not trying to put a silver lining in it and be
and sugarcoat it
and justify it. Be like, oh yeah, I only got in that drunk driving accident because I was drinking whiskey that night, and I know I can't drink whiskey. If I drink vodka, I'll be fine. Like, no, like, doesn't matter what the fuck you're drinking.
Yeah.
If you have, and then I'm sure people will twist it or try to spin a narrative in their head, but that's really not, you're not being realistic with yourself. Like, obviously, if you're to the point of staying sober, you've admitted you have a problem. You have to look at the whole problem, not look at it as like, oh, well, that was only a problem because X, Y, and Z, or because, like, because if you're at the point of admitting you have an alcoholic problem, there's been too many instances for the fact of you trying to figure out any justification. So honestly, just look at it head on for what it is.
Exactly, for what it is.
And yeah, and then process that, sink into those feelings if you need to, because you're really questioning, I want to do this. And hopefully you make the right decision and realize that it's not in your best interest and you're able to process it and move on. That's the next thing on here is redirect your focus. If you want to drink, tell someone and go do something else you know will make you feel good after. Go to the gym, hang out with a friend, which I think that's great advice personally. Like I said, it's if you are redirecting that energy that maybe you're putting on drinking into something else, although hard, it does take discipline, self-control.
Yeah.
But this is where having a support system, and whether that be a sponsor through AA, a close friend, a significant other, a family member that is just aware of your problem and that you could rely on. That way you go to them, and I know it's hard for people to ask for help. It's super hard, but having that support and going to them, just being like, I don't know what to do, I'm really having these urges, and they're just kind of like letting them hold space for you, and then being open to whatever their advice is on it. Their non-judgmental advice, which we'll touch on later for like holding the space, being in a place, trying to support somebody, but you having that person that you could go to when you're having those feelings, I think is very crucial, and like redirecting that energy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my thing with that is definitely the gym. I used the gym as my safe haven for a long time, and I know a lot of people are like, oh, that's an addiction too, and I guess I could definitely see it as that. Sometimes for people, when it becomes, I don't know, I guess if it's affecting, your life, everything in moderation, I guess. But for me, I didn't care. I was like, well, if I have an addiction to the gym, I'd rather have an addiction to that than this thing that's literally killing me. So I kind of I chose whatever my better addiction was. I don't call it that, it is something that I genuinely enjoy and love doing, and I know when to take a break from it. Like, I don't, push myself to the point of, where it's like a detriment to my body or anything, but definitely that is something that I know that a lot of people with addiction problems end up like turning to, because we are very passionate people, and you can turn that obsession and that passion into things that benefit your life. You can do it on starting your own business and really expressing, because we have a lot of stuff in us. So it's like, go out and like just kind of redirect your focus into something that is going to give you benefit in the long run. And that's why I was like, I have so much energy, like I'm a very energetic person, so I had not ever worked out ever, and so I was like, well, I know that this is going to take me probably years to get even close to where I want to be. So I would go to the gym, and I remember, I've told Jordan this story a couple times, but I remember going to the gym at the beginning, and it was my body, oh my gosh, living off of drugs and junk food and alcohol for so many years. It was really excruciating. Like, I remember going to the gym and just running on the treadmill for like 15-20 minutes, and I would be crying, and I just kept telling myself over and over in my head, when you have the same amount of hours at the gym, where you are like crying or whatever and pushing yourself, the same amount as you did spending it in your bed or on the floor or in a car or wherever, hungover or high or feeling like shit and like you wanted to die. Like, as soon as those hours match up, then you can stop working out. And I literally told myself that for like months, because it was hard for me at first. It was because all I ever wanted to do was like party and go do whatever, but I was disciplining myself, and that was my personal, I'm not saying everyone has to do that, but that was my personal way that it got me to go there. And I was like, you're right. Like, how many hours that I've spent just hating my life and feeling hungover and feeling like shit and, not feeling strong, feeling weak. And I was So, but I knew, I was like, I know when those hours match, then I'll be so in love with the gym that I don't have to and it didn't take very long for me to actually start enjoying it and love going. And it really was, it became at first it was kind of physical and like to keep my mind off of, you know, drinking and stuff for keeping me busy, but it really did end up becoming more of a mental thing for me.
Definitely.
It really I started to feel happiness again. I started to feel those feelings that I wasn't able to feel for so long because I was numbing them.
Definitely. I think redirecting your energy into something productive, whatever that is, the gym's a great one, but if it's woodworking,
yeah, it doesn't have to be the gym, that's
art
just my
or music or whatever it is, if it's going on hikes, whatever it is that you could redirect it in and do sober to kind of minimally take your mind off it.
Read.
Yeah,
do anything that you think will benefit you in any way or keep your mind off of it. Cooking could be.
And yes, cooking's a great one. This brings me to my next point that isn't on here, but I wanted to add, and that's remembering your why. Remembering why you're choosing to get sober. And if you don't have a good enough why, come the fuck up with one. If you need help coming up with a good enough why, we could talk about it. I'm sure that we could get to the bottom of your why, but you need a strong enough why as you want to stay sober, whether that be just for your own.
Mine was if I wanted to live.
Yeah.
I knew I was going down such a scary path that I knew that at one point it was going to be the death of me in one way or another, whether it be a car accident or my body shutting down or me getting, you know, something happening to me. But I was like, I'm choosing my life.
Yeah, definitely.
And it really comes down to that for a lot of people, I think.
It's really, you need to know your why and be true to your why. Whether everybody's why could be different, but it's probably will be all similar, but remember your why and let your why drive you as to make the right decisions.
Yeah, it could be even, I mean, to get your family back. Some people are losing.
Or keep your family.
Keep your family, or keep
your job.
Yeah, if you like anything in your life, be very wary of it, because if you are continuing on that path, those will be the things that you lose.
Definitely. And the last thing on here is keep focusing on how good life is and will be for you. Stop dwelling on what's done and detach from it. I think that's just great advice. For what that says straight up is great advice if you want to expound upon that.
Yeah, I mean, just don't dwell upon the things that you did, whether you were, you know, high or drunk or whatever. Just anything from the past, leave it in the past. It happened. Anything that's, you know, that you continuously create this cycle because you're dwelling upon something that you did to somebody or somebody did to you. You know, obviously, I don't want to say like put these things down and like hide them more, because that's exactly why we end up drinking, is to numb that pain from those things. But, you know, let them out, write them down, burn their paper, like release it, to get that out of you. Talk to someone. Like, get it out of you and release it to the universe and let it go and be in your past. It was your past, and that was your past, and don't dwell upon it, because if you keep thinking to yourself like, oh, I'm such a bad person because I did this, or I'm such a bad person because this happened to me, then it's only going to keep perpetuating that cycle and make you want to go down that, you want to numb that, and so you just want to keep doing, you know, your thing again.
Definitely. And I think on top of not only having a support people in your life, but also hiring professional help to be supportive.
Definitely.
Like, you have a therapist integrated in all of this as well, along with your friends. Like, friends could have your best interest in mind and will have your best interest in mind with the correct friends, but they're still, I mean, unless they are professionally trained, they're not professionally trained therapists, they aren't clinical psychologists. So I think kind of forming, I mean, psychologists or therapists could give you bad advice too. That doesn't mean like your friend.
But it is still really, if you find a good one, it's really, really helpful.
Beneficial.
It really is. Just being able to talk to them and having an unbiased opinion, and hopefully somebody that'll, you know, call you on your bullshit.
Yeah, definitely.
Because you need that.
Definitely. And there's another thing that I wanted to add to this, which is the article I have pulled up on my computer. Is I was aware of this. I believe I initially first heard this in a documentary on Netflix, about how one of the founders of Alcoholics Anonymous, Bill Wilson, kind of gave credit to the founding of AA to LSD. And I know me personally, my own experiences, which I can't say or deny the fact of like my relationship with alcohol or other substances isn't largely attributed to like the use of psychedelics, but I know it hasn't hurt them for the fact of just making me aware of my actions and like the thoughts that go on in my head surrounding potentially doing different substances, and has given me more control over what I'm physically doing, whether that's meditating or going to the gym or what I'm putting in my body, and alcohol is that. So I can't personally dispute that. But I know you have your own viewpoints and opinions on how potentially they affected you, so I'd love to hear yours on that. And then I also want to read this article for reference to all of our listeners, so they're aware of it. I will include this article in the show notes too, so you could look at it for yourself, do your own research, because I find this personally fascinating. So you can take it away though.
Yeah, it is super interesting. And before I had done psychedelics, I didn't really think about them too much, I guess. They kind of came up in my experience a little bit, but I guess it wasn't really my thing. My thing was, like drinking and other things. And the first time that we hung out in New York and I took acid for my first time, I was just thinking this when you were talking, but this is kind of, because I don't want to tell people like, oh, I took psychedelics and then I got sober. But in my reality, that's honestly kind of what happened. Like, I did drink a little bit after. I can't say like I took acid and like never drank again, but it was sparse. And when I did drink, I didn't want to be, for one. I still wanted to be sober. I still had that, want to be sober. And but when I took acid for the first time, it really showed me, it reminded me of the beauty in life, because I had lost sight of that for so long that I have goosebumps right now. I didn't see any beauty in life. And when I took acid, I know that it shifted my perspective, like, oh my God, where have you been? Where have you been? I was, just out there kind of losing myself and just not really recognizing the beauty that is right in front of my face every single day. And that's something that I lost sight of big time from drinking and doing drugs, because it dulls everything. Like, you might be numb to the pain for a little bit, but you're also numb to any joy and any of the positive feelings as well. You don't get to pick and choose. You don't get to have the good parts and leave the bad parts. It all comes down. So I felt like I had like this veil lifted off of me, and I was like, whoa, I can see colors again. I can see the beauty that really is out there, and I wanted that. And I already knew what what was keeping me from that was my substance abuse problems. And so I was like, well, I want to keep that beauty in my life, and I want to keep it going. So once I was like, nope, this might be really hard, and I don't know what the fuck I'm going to do. And I had no idea what the future was going to hold, but I just decided that I couldn't, keep doing what I was doing, because I knew that was the reason that was holding me back. And so, yeah, psychedelics for me, I can say, played a part for sure. I know that they did. And I don't want to be like, yeah, everyone go take psychedelics and it'll like cure you, but honestly I kind of want to. But at the same time, I know that once you do see that beauty, like I have had some wonky trips that scared me a little bit, because after I got that initial, look how beautiful it is, you still have a lot of stuff that you have to work on. And so then that started showing up later, and then it was like, whoa, like now you do have it. Once you get sober, it's not all rainbows and butterflies. Like, it's not. There's a lot of stuff that's going to come out. It's going to be really overwhelming, because at the same time of you not having those substances to numb you, all of these emotions and stuff is gonna start to rise, and you're gonna start to feel them, and it's gonna feel like, what the fuck? But that's when you have to really start to you get a therapist, get a support system, start working on your stuff immediately.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff I want to add on this with the site. This isn't
Yeah.
End all be all cure for everyone. It's a case by case basis. I'm understanding of the narratives that people potentially run, and they might be like, yeah, sure, I can take acid or I can do mushrooms, and it might be good, and I'm going in with the best intentions. But then tomorrow, I sensed that euphoria, and now that I sense the euphoria, those weren't my drugs of choice anyway, which they're not. I don't classify them as drugs to begin with. I believe they're medicine when done mindfully in the right setting with the right intentions. But that wasn't my substance of choice. My substance of choice is alcohol or cocaine or heroin or whatever it is. So now that I've experienced that euphoria, it's triggered that, and now I want to get it. So I understand how that might not be the best for everybody, but I do think there's a lot of utility in it for the fact it's done mindfully with the right support system, far enough removed far enough into your sobriety as well to kind of recognize your triggers and your feelings, and then you have that support system to rely on. A lot of this can be navigated. It really depends on your journey. The article I'm going to read might even state it a little bit differently than I'm going to state it, and I want to, like I said, this is not an end-all be-all cure for everyone, but I do find it very fascinating and interesting just because of my own experiences with psychedelics and the benefits that I've gained from it. So I could see the utility in it, and I wanted to share it with you guys. Like I said, I'm going to include this in the show notes, but I'm going to start reading the article. The title is Bill Wilson, LSD, Secret Psychedelic History of Alcoholics Anonymous. Taking one mind-altering drug to free oneself from addiction to another mind-altering drug may sound counterintuitive. But like with all things psychedelic, this therapeutic approach is about set and setting, intention, and integration. What kind of drugs are consumed, how often, and at what dose? Those who preach that the only way to achieve long-lasting sobriety is through total abstinence from alcohol and all other drugs may be surprised to learn that the supposed patron saint of abstinence, Bill Wilson, the co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, was a firm believer in the ability of LSD to free the hardcore alcoholics from their addiction. Bill Wilson's enthusiasm for LSD as a tool in the 12-step work is best expressed in his correspondence in 1961 with the famous Swiss psychologist Carl Jung. Jung was discussing how he agreed with Wilson that some diehard alcoholics must have a spiritual awakening to overcome their addiction. He pointed out that the Latin word for alcohol is spiritus. You use the same word for the highest religious experience, Jung wrote, as for the most depraving poison. The letter of January 30th, 1961, in response to the long letter Wilson wrote to Jung, is fairly famous in AA circles, but in researching my book, Distilled Spirits, Getting High, Then Sober, with a famous writer, a forgotten philosopher, and a hopeless drunk, I discovered a second Wilson letter to Jung. In that letter of March 29, 1961, Wilson writes at length about his experiments using LSD to help members of Alcoholics Anonymous have the spiritual awakening that is central to this 12-step program of recovery. Some of my AA friends and I have taken the material LSD frequently and with much benefit, Wilson told Jung, adding that the powerful psychedelic drug sparks a great broadening and deepening and heightened of consciousness. Wilson told Jung that the first LSD trip in 1956 reminded him of a mystical revelation he had after hitting bottom in the 1930s and winding up in a New York City hospital ward for hardcore alcoholics. My original spontaneous spiritual experience of 25 years before was enacted with the wonderful splendor and conviction, he wrote. LSD was legal in 1956, and in Wilson's case, initially taken under the medical supervision of UCLA researcher Sidney Cohen, and with the spiritual guidance of Wilson's friend, Gerald Hurd, an Anglo-Irish mystic and early proponent of psychedelic spirituality. Wilson would go on to quietly form a bi-coastal psychedelic salon with various leading lights of that decade, including the writer Aldous Huxley. Wilson's earliest experience occurred in December 1934 before LSD was even invented. It happened during Wilson's fourth and final stay at a private New York City hospital that employed something called the Townes-Lambert cure to treat their alcoholic clients. Many of these patients, including Wilson, were once successful businessmen whose drinking had spun out of control during the Great Depression. Suddenly, Bill would later recall, my room blazed in indescribable white light. I was seized with the ecstasy beyond description. That room was in a rehab center where doctors employed a potion which included 2 drugs derived from plants known to cause delirium and hallucinations. One of them is belladonna and the other is henbane, was long associated with witchcraft and potions said to summon the spirits of the dead. Warning to psychonauts, both of these plants can be poisonous at high doses. So there's a good chance that psychoactive plants played a role in what came to be known as the founding vision of Alcoholics Anonymous. Even though the effects of the herbs used Towns Hospital differ from other psychedelic plants and from the LSD Wilson began experimenting with 2 decades later. Here's how Bill W. would later describe his Towns Hospital vision. In the mind's eye, there was a mountain. I stood upon its summit where a great wind blew, a wind not of air, but of spirit. In great clean strength, it blew right through me. Then came the blazing thought, you are a free man. In my view, it doesn't really matter if Bill's vision was caused by psychoactive plants, divine revelation, or the hallucinations hardcore drunks sometimes experience when they hit bottom and stop drinking. What matters is that the vision transformed his life and inspired a crusade to free other alcoholics from addiction. One of the foundations of the 12-step recovery program Wilson and company devised in the 1930s is the proposition that alcoholics and other addicts must undergo a spiritual awakening, inspiring them to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understand Him. Those are the only words in the 12 steps that were printed in italics, indicating an openness in the early AA circles to finding God in the Judeo-Christian tradition, Eastern spirituality, or 20 years later in a tab of acid. In fact, long before he discovered psychedelics, Wilson was a serious student of paranormal psychology and the various forms of spiritualism, holding seances and other gatherings with some of the leading psychics of his time. In his second letter to Jung, Bill Wilson told Jung that the members of AA have returned to the churches almost always with fine results, but some of us have taken less orthodox paths. Along with a number of friends, I find myself among the latter. Wilson cited the Canadian research of Humphrey Osmond, the man who turned Huxley on to mescaline in 1953. As Osmond reported that 150 hardcore alcoholics were preconditioned by LSD and then placed in the surrounding AA groups. Over a 3-year period, they achieved startling results when compared to similar drunks who were not treated with psychedelics but only got AA. My friends believe that LSD temporarily triggered a change in blood chemistry that inhibits or reduces ego, thereby enabling more reality to be felt and seen, Wilson told Jung. Jung became seriously ill around the time he received Wilson's second letter. He never answered that missive, and he may not have even gotten a chance to read it before he died. Jung died on June 6, 1941. Bill Wilson died 10 years later from diseases caused by other addiction he could never shake, cigarettes. In the end, much came of Bill Wilson's idea to introduce LSD not much came of Bill Wilson's idea to introduce LSD into Alcoholics Anonymous. More cautious and conservative elements in the AA fellowship pushed back, questioning their founders' unbridled enthusiasm for the drug. In one letter, Wilson asserted that the powerful psychoactive compound was about as harmless as aspirin, but in another piece of correspondence, he acknowledged LSD does not have any miraculous property transforming spiritually and emotionally sick people into healthy ones overnight. Wilson also wrote that the opposing his LSD enthusiasm in AA were joking that Bill just takes one pill to see God and another one to quiet his nerves. Meanwhile, by the 1960s, the notorious LSD evangelists and counterculture icons as Harvard professor Timothy Leary and Merry pranksters Ken Kesey had begun turning mainstream America against the idea of psychedelic therapy. So this goes on. I'm not going to read the rest of it. Like I said, I'm going to include this in the show notes, but I thought that this article was very intriguing as to how people have used psychedelics to kind of help them kickstart their sobriety. So
Yeah, I really like how you said. I don't think that it's just do this and there is no one thing that's going to just make it all better. It really comes down to how bad you want it and what you're willing to do. But if you're willing to get that support system, talk to people, redirect your attention, start to pick up the thing, and it's not, I don't want to say it's easy. It's not going to be easy,
but it's worth it.
It's worth it. It is very worth it. And if you can get yourself to do those things, it is so beyond worth it. And yeah, back to the psychedelics thing, I will forever say that it helped me. I'll never say that it's the one thing, because I put in a lot of work, and it was something that I wanted for years. I had been trying to get sober since I was 24, and then I think maybe 4 months after I took acid for the first time, I was like, I'm done. And 2 years later, here I am, and that's crazy, because I'm like, I don't want to say like, oh, it was just so easy, but like when I knew I was done, and it really wasn't hard for me after that.
Yeah, I definitely want people to go check this article out. It goes to further relate case studies or some accounts of how it doesn't work for everybody, but it works for people with the right support network and the right environment, and how there is utility in it. So I just found that interesting. I wanted to highlight that for getting sober. I don't know if you have anything else you want to add before we move on to the next subject.
No, I just very grateful for psychedelics, and I'm very grateful for you for introducing me to them.
Very grateful for you being open to trying them. They've helped me out tremendously in my life with my own pitfalls, and so I know how helpful they could be.
I'm a believer. I'm a firm believer.
Me too. So the final topic, moving on, is the tips for supporting somebody that is trying to get sober or is sober. The first thing you have down here is, do not try to guilt and shame them into sobriety. They will only want to drink more. Which I learned that through you. Not that I ever really felt that I tried to make you feel bad for being for having urges, but through talking to you and you expressing don't ever make somebody feel bad for the urges that they have, or being yeah, or if they did go drink and then they're coming to you and be yeah, so I drank last night, don't make them feel bad for it. They're already probably feeling guilty enough, and you could ultimately trigger their obsession to want to go drink more by you casting your judgments on them for the fact that they did drink the night before.
Yeah, the more you don't want them to do that, the more they're gonna want to go and do that.
Yeah, you want to hold the space from a non-judgmental perspective. The person also has to know themselves well enough, because from my own personal experiences talking to people, I've been what do I have to do to support you in your sobriety? Do you need me to be there for you? But they need to want the help. They can't.
Yeah.
You can't offer the help to somebody that doesn't want the help. So they need to be real themselves and ultimately real with you, and then you just can't judge them for whatever it is that they ask. They might not ask for anything. They might just be no, you caring and showing that you care is enough help for me. But don't judge them for whatever it is that they're doing. Just take it for what it is, and then try to help them potentially move on and overcome that, so they're not beating themselves up about it. Another thing that you wrote down is ask them to talk and see if they can get to some root causes.
Yeah, depending on how close you are with them. I know that some people are a little bit more reluctant to open up than others, but if it's somebody that genuinely, first step, they want to get help. First step, they chose that they want to change their life, not anyone soliciting to them, hey, I think that you have a problem, you should get better, don't do that. But if they come to you, or they have admitted that they have a problem, and people will be hey, look, I think I have a problem, I need help, I need support. What was it? I'm sorry.
You're good. So just help ask them what their root causes are.
Yes, but if you're that close of a person to them, try to talk them through it and see how much they can open up to you, because there's always a root problem. Whether it be traumas or something, there's always a root cause of it, and maybe it is that they hate their job, or they hate where they live, or they hate, you know, like try to get to these problems and then try to come up with solutions together.
Yeah, identifying the feelings it triggers.
Mm-hmm.
Like what happened to make you feel
Yeah,
that way.
when did you drink? Or when did you do that? Like, when did you call that person? Like,
when did you get the urge to drink? Like,
That's
what was going on
yeah,
in
what
your
was
life?
going on around that time
Yes.
to do that, but try to get to the root cause of it and then shed light on it so you guys can talk about it, bring it up, figure out, you know, ways to not have that, because we do have triggers.
Definitely, and that's where it comes back into being vulnerable. If you want to change something, usually, and you need that light shed on it, you need to be vulnerable and realize who you're talking to, that they have your best intentions in mind, and be open and honest with yourself and then them, and that definitely helps navigate those waters a little bit more manageable. The next thing, which I completely agree with, that you wrote here, is don't enable somebody to drink, and set boundaries with somebody who might be tempted to drink. You want me to take it? All right.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
mine is point blank, and this might, I mean, I'm literally gonna say this, I want to say it's common sense, but sometimes common sense isn't that common. Don't ask them to do the things with you.
Yeah.
Don't ask them to drink with you. Don't ask them to do.
Yeah, if you're going out to the club that night and you know that you're gonna drink, don't invite them and be like, yeah, I mean, you could stay sober, right? Like, I'm gonna drink. Like, make sure that if you're the sober, or if you're not the one that is having some sort of substance abuse like problem, that you don't make it any harder on them by being like, oh, I'm just trying to include them, but like I could drink. And you brought this out earlier, that most people that are suffering from sort of some substance abuse issues, specifically alcohol, if you ask them, is it going to bother you if I drink tonight? They're not going to be honest with you, and they're going to tell you no. But it's still, you said this yesterday, you're going to hang around a barbershop long enough, you're going to get a haircut.
Yeah.
So if you are that supportive friend, or you are that, like, be very mindful of what substances you're doing. Try to not do any around them, and then also don't glorify the fact of by telling them stories of like, oh yeah, I went out and I got fucked up last night and I had such a great time. You don't want to add any salt to the wound.
Yeah, and please don't bring it into their experience. So it definitely, if somebody is trying to stay away from the thing and they're keeping it out of their household, please do not be that person to bring it to where they are and like have them see it, because we are taking in things to our subconscious and everything, and so it really goes hand in hand with that quote. You hang around, if you're witnessing, if you're seeing this visually over and over and over again in your head, it's only a matter of time until you slip back into that. So if they see you coming over and they're like, oh well, you're the one with the problem, I don't have the problem, then you're doing them a very, very bad disservice.
Definitely. And then also the setting boundaries part that comes into play when you are being their part of their support network, and you want to be there for them as much as possible, but you also need to take care of yourself first. Like, you need to make sure your cup's full before you go and help somebody else. So the boundaries with that are whatever, they're on a case-by-case basis, but if it's like, hey man, I could be there for you, but I'm trying to be there as much as possible, but you can't call me 24/7. Like, I understand that I'm there for you, but you can't call me at 3 a.m. because you're getting a drink, like an urge to drink. I need to sleep. That's just an example. I mean, you could also do that if you got enough energy for them, you care for the person enough, but just put yourself first.
Or if they're taking advantage. I mean, if they're literally taking advantage of your niceness, and because, sometimes you get into some sticky situations, and if it's, like a nightly thing where you're getting phone calls in the middle of the night, not even just phone calls, like, you do want to be there for your friend, but at the same time, like, they could be asking you for things, or like something went wrong again, or they need money again, or they need a place to stay again. It's like a number of different things that people can, when they're in their addiction, you don't have no shame like to ask for anything, or like to walk over people. Like, no, your addiction comes first before anything else. So
Definitely.
Make sure if somebody is, in your life that's doing those things, you really set your boundaries, because that is enabling them by being like, okay, like, I'll come pick you up again, I'll give you money again, I'll do this for you again, And just because you care about them, and they're taking advantage of, you know, the fact that you care about them, and that's not going to help them want to change, because they're like, oh, well, I can get away with it.
Yeah, definitely. Those boundaries are super important. Next up is listen and let them know you care and want what's best for them. So obviously, like I said, your boundaries are a case-by-case basis. Me personally speaking, I think I'm a pretty good listener, and I have a lot of space to hold for people, and that's where I feel is one of my strong suits of just who I am. So you want to listen, you want to hold that space for them, and you want to let them know that you care and you want what's best for them. And then ultimately, like me personally speaking, you ask them, like, what's best for you? How can I help support you in what you think will help make this situation better or increase your chances of staying sober? And let them answer you, and then you just pretty much act in alignment with whatever they tell you. If they're like, yeah, man, I really just, like, I need to talk to you every day at, like, 6 o'clock at night. Are you going to be around? Like, okay, yeah, sure, I can make time for that. Or can you just...
I mean, my thing to you was, I literally asked you, I was like, can you not drink in front of me? And you were like, yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
You did that for me. Like, I told you what I needed. And for me personally, I can't have that. And I know that. And so the fact that you were so willing to just be like, okay, that's good. You know, I'm fine with that. That helps me tremendously and has. So I'm super grateful for you for that.
Yeah, definitely. Whatever anybody, if you care about somebody enough, this is one thing that I definitely wanted to illustrate is, so me and my thoughts around addiction, I understand them more now than I ever have, but I still don't completely understand it because I haven't lived it. And I don't need to understand it though. Like, I love you and I support what you're trying to do, like, that much that I don't have to completely understand it. It's just like, this is what you need in order for you to be your best self, and I don't need to drink to make me a better person or a worse person. Like, I could leave it. Like, I could take it or leave it. So I don't need to get it and need to justify it to myself. It's just like, okay, I love you, and like, this is what'll make you better. I know it doesn't make me any better, so like, yeah, it's fine. So like, if you care about somebody enough, like, you'll be able to put you're able to put your substance usage to the side, even if it doesn't fully resonate with you as to like, well, I don't have a problem. Like, you're like, yeah, great, I don't have a problem, lucky me. But this person does. They're saying
well,
they
if you
have
don't
a problem.
have a problem and you're not willing, if you can't do that, then you might have a problem.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I'm like, because you saying you don't have a problem, you're saying, no, I don't have to. You showed me you don't have a problem. I watched you just be like, nope, that's fine. I'm like, whoa, what the fuck? Like, people really don't have it like that? Like, and yeah, but if they're really not willing to do that, like, people in my life prior to you were not able to do that. They were told to do all the things, and they were not able to do that because they had a problem themselves.
Yeah, so I mean, like I said, I'm grateful that I don't.
I'm grateful that you don't.
Like me, I'm also admitting I still don't fully understand the problem, but for the fact of me not having one, then I'm like, it just makes your life so much easier, my life so much easier. Just like, why do I need to hold on to like this substance so tightly and like tempt you and like bring in whatever energy that me drinking on a consistent basis how it would affect us? I'm like, no, I'm good. Like, I don't need that. I'm fine. I'll stick with my mindful usage of psychedelics that are only going to benefit my life, and I'm perfectly happy with that.
Yeah. And yeah.
Yeah.
That.
And then the last thing on here is, well, I guess there's two more things on here. Don't pressure them into telling them what they need to do.
Yeah,
they need to want to do it for themselves. That you can't tell them, you need to get sober. I can't believe you fucking went out and got fucked up last night. Like, there's no room for judgment in helping somebody get sober.
It makes it worse.
Yep.
They're literally they already know. They already know if it's that bad. They are already beating themselves up, and they don't need somebody else coming in and telling them that they have a problem that they need to change, because then Jordan said this earlier, it is a control thing. And I definitely use that because I'm like, oh, you think I have a problem? I had people, if I was like dating people, whatever, and they ever tried to tell me that I had a problem, I'm like, oh, I have a problem, huh? And it would be horrible because that was what I could control.
Yep.
And I was like, you can't control how much I put into my body, so I would just go off the deep end, and it makes it worse. So don't ever go to somebody and
don't pressure them into doing something.
They need to come to you.
Yeah, you just need to hold the space, let them come to you, let them tell you their needs, and then support them in their needs.
Yeah, and I'm sorry that it's hard, especially when it's somebody that you love, because you just badly want to see them doing well for themselves, but it's not your place.
Yeah, it's like if you get so mad at somebody and you're like, I'm gonna beat their ass to teach them a lesson. What are the chances that you're actually gonna teach them a lesson by beating their ass? Probably not. They're probably just gonna resent you a little for it, and then not feel safe wanting to come to you. They're like, oh, does this person really have my best interests, or are they just gonna like yell at me and get so upset with me, and like now I don't feel safe coming to them, being like, oh man, I drank yesterday. It was really hard. Like.
But you can, it kind of goes back, you can set your boundaries. If this is a person that's, like living in your house and whatever, like you can go to them and say, hey, look, I think you have a problem. I'm setting my boundaries and you need to get out. Like not like that, but don't go to somebody and just be like, hey man, like I think we need to like go get you some help.
Yeah, I mean, they have anybody.
They're not gonna, if they're not willing to do it for themselves, then they might they might jump through the hoops. They might go to treatment for you. They might do, this step and this step for you, but they ain't gonna, they're faking it.
For anything lasting to stick, somebody has to want the help and want to change for themselves.
Yeah.
You can't change for anybody else. You can wish and hope and pray and be like, I'm gonna change for my girlfriend. She really wants me to get sober. Well, guess what?
No.
That's not a good enough why. That's not a good enough reason to change. It has to be for you because you want to take control of your life. You want to take back your life.
If it's anything external, then that gives you just more of a reason to go back to it if that thing doesn't work out or something.
You get in a fight with your girlfriend and you're like, well, I'm getting sober for you, and now she just yelled at me for something else. Like,
it has to be.
I'm going to go drink then. Like, it needs to be exclusively for you. So ultimately, you need to recognize that in yourself and go do it for yourself. And from the supportive side of things, you can't pressure somebody into wanting it for themselves. Like, you could want somebody to eat healthy and they're still going to eat their shitty food, and it's not you giving them shit about it isn't going to make them want to do it anymore. They have to want it for themselves. So just keep the pressure like to a non-existent minimum, and let them come to you, express their needs, and support them in that.
If you want to share ideas or share things with them, even that's kind of yes, definitely.
Like I said, I think in the vulnerability podcast, ask them like, what do you want right now? Do you just want a hug and make me like, you want to feel better, or do you want me to give you some advice? And then,
or do you want to listen to this podcast that I just heard?
Yeah, that's called That's Life Podcast, episode 9 about sobriety.
Yeah, that.
And then the last thing you have on here is to suggest more productive things to do for somebody that's trying to, for me, like say, example, me supporting you.
Yeah, so I was thinking of either suggesting it to them, but I mean, it would be better if you could do it with them, if you were with them and being willing to do things sober and trying new things and just having new experiences, creating new habits, going to the gym together, or going traveling together, or going for a jog, or going hiking, or doing other things that are kind of out of the realm of what you've done.
Definitely.
Or what they've done. I guess this is the support system.
Yeah, and if they're open to it, and like obviously they are, ultimately if they're open to it and agreeable to it, like potentially show them new things. If they trust you enough, they like you enough, like maybe they're like, oh well, I don't know what to do, like all that I care about it, then it's like, all right, well, like how about let's go to a museum. Like you said, you want to stop doing it. Let's go check this museum out, or like let's go to this park, or let's go on this trip. together, and I could be your support. I don't
Yeah.
need to drink with you. We could go away on a weekend adventure, and we both be sober.
Exactly. That was what I wanted to say before we finish this. You have to create, this is from me, from my experience, you have to create a life that is more desirable, because if you don't, then you're always going to go back, because you're going to want to get away from your environment because you don't like where you're at. You don't like your job, you don't like your spouse, you don't like your whatever it may be around you, so you always just want to, you're escaping. And so you want to create a life that you don't want to escape from. So that's where the fun things come in, the new experiences and all the fun things that you get to see and do. Like, that's why if you try to get sober and you're just literally living in the same exact way that you did, but just minus the drinking or minus the drugs, you're always going to go back to it because you're so habitually in that groove, that habit loop, that it is going to come back. Definitely. So shake it up, shake up your life a little bit, create new experiences, do things that are different than what you normally would do. Might feel a little bit uncomfortable, but eventually it's gonna be exciting.
Ask yourself what's more uncomfortable, doing something new or facing the regret of having another drunk night where you fucked up your relationship, you fucked up your car, you missed work, you got all the anxiety from whatever you did the night before that maybe you don't even remember. Mm-hmm. And ask yourself what's harder, putting yourself in a new place sober or running the risk of whatever could happen when you decide to drink again.
Yep, definitely.
But that being said, I don't know if you have anything else you wanted to add to this podcast.
No, I think that was the last thing.
Well, I wanted to thank you for being ultimately the catalyst behind this topic, sharing your story, coming up with these bullet points to go over in this podcast. I wanted to thank everybody for tuning in. We plan on keeping on cranking these podcasts out. I know that this is, I think, our third one in 3 days.
Oh, no, you can keep going. Sorry.
So you're good. So I just wanted to thank everybody for tuning in. If you like this episode, it resonates with you, please share it with a friend, comment on our IG. I want to get other people's opinions on this. Potentially, if I have a relationship with you and you're a sober friend, which I have numerous of them, and you'd like to talk about the subject, because I know everybody has their own unique story, and I think getting everybody's stories out are important. So yeah, reach out to me. I'd love to get your feedback on this. I'd love to hear your story. I think there's a lot of people that need help in this regard, so that's why it's been a topic. And if you have anything else you want to add?
Yeah, before we ended this, I did think of something. I just wanted to say that I am grateful to be an addict. And this is something I heard this when I went to AA, when I first started I wasn't sober, but I started going to meetings just to see what they were about. And I remember multiple people saying that they were grateful alcoholics. I'm a grateful alcoholic, or I'm a grateful addict. And I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, why are you grateful? Like, I'm miserable. Like, I hate this. This is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. And it's probably honestly one of the best things that's ever happened to me, because if I hadn't been, I wouldn't be sharing this story and getting to help. I wouldn't have the drive to help anyone, and I wouldn't have the drive to better my life to the point where it is at. If I hadn't had those severe problems with it, then I might still be in it, just moseying around, just still drinking, but not really fucking up my life too bad. So the fact that it was so severe and so in my face that I had no other choice but to change, I am grateful. I am grateful for that, because I know that it is going to, for me, overcoming that and helping other people is putting me in more of a beautiful place than I could ever even imagine myself being.
Definitely being in service to others is always the most rewarding path you could choose. So I'm sad that you had to go through everything you went through, but I'm grateful too, because now I get to help people with you in that regard.
Yeah, definitely. And I love you all so much. Thank you everyone for listening and for letting me share my story. Hopefully with with non-judgment. I'm not ashamed of anything that's happened to me or anything that I've done. I've came to peace with all of it, so it's really easy for me to talk about now, because I don't carry that guilt and shame with me anymore. And I'm like, it is what it is. That was my life. There. Yep.
Yeah.
Look at it. Like I lived it. Cool. But look at all the stuff that I've overcame. I'm very happy to be where I'm at.
One thing that I've tried personally working on. I think that there's a lot of utility in the art of practicing non-judgment for everything, every person, every experience. Treat it like a new experience. That might be a new concept for some, but play with that in your head about approaching people's stories or experiences or food or just life within a non-judgmental manner, just taking it for what it is and being discerning, but not being judgmental. There's a difference. Look it up.
And when you stop judging everything outside of you, this is another personal experience thing, because I've been guilty of being one of the most judgiest people ever, and when I started not judging everything and everyone, I stopped judging myself so much, and it's great.
Yeah, I do think, well, everything starts internally, so obviously if you're judging other things, you're most likely the toughest critic on yourself, which I've struggled with that as well, but definitely approaching everything in a non-judgmental manner if you're coming out of sobriety, and like, don't judge yourself on what happened. If you're trying to support somebody that's become...
maybe that is why I stopped judging people so much, is because I stopped judging myself so much.
Definitely.
That makes sense.
Definitely. And then also, if you're supporting people coming out of sobriety, like trying to become sober, don't judge them for what they did. Don't put any of your judgments upon them. Take them for where they're at, where they want to go, and support them in that. But that's all that I got for this episode. I wanted to thank everybody for tuning in.
Love you.
Yeah, a whole lot of big love for this episode. You're not alone. Please, if this podcast resonates with you, share it with a friend. And I can't wait to hear the feedback. I love you all so much, and we're out.